I'm a former police officer, and for years worked out patrolling a town near where I live. This was many years ago now, but one memory sticks with me of something that was really bizarre. It was the late 1990s, and I was working alone in my car during an overnight shift. The area that I worked was mostly quiet. It was fairly rural and kind of spread out. After being somewhat busy in the early evening, it was now the late night hours. Things quieted down significantly, and the roads had less and less traffic. I didn't really have anything to do at the moment, so I decided to drive to a spot that was common for police to sit at. There was this winding road that went right next to this large woods. It was really common for people to speed on that spot and go like 20 or 30 or even more miles per hour over the speed limit there. And there was this gravel spot off the road right next to the woods where we would sometimes sit and catch speeders. It was hard to see a cop car there, especially at night. So I went and I parked there and faced the road. I was maybe 20 feet away from the road, and to my right was the woods, and to the left was a grass field that had some scattered bushes and trees and such in it. I sat there, and the road was very quiet. There would be a car that would drive down every so often, probably about 2 or 3 per minute, but mostly there was nothing really going on. Several minutes went by. I just sat there for about 10 minutes or so. Then, out of nowhere, I heard this really loud thud on the back of my car. I looked back and saw something large in my back window for just a second, and then heard another noise as if somebody had kicked my car. I also saw somebody out the back window, very brief. It all happened so fast. Then I just barely saw them running away. I realized very quickly that somebody had thrown a massive rock at my back window and then seemingly kicked at the back of my car or something like that. I instantly got out and ran around my car. By the time I got out though, the person was running away and they were now in the woods. I heard them running through the woods, but I could not see them anymore. I went after them, yelling that I was police and for them to stop. The person did not stop. They continued running through the woods, and I was now running after them. As I got in there, it was very thick, but I could hear whoever it was a ways up. I still couldn't see them though. They seemed to be really fast and probably know their way around there. I continued to run, yelling at them to stop over and over as I did. We kept going and going, but I never knew exactly what direction this person was going in and never even fully saw them. After chasing for well over a minute, I was hearing this person less and less. It was hard to tell, I remember, because my running was making a lot of noise on its own with going through all the trees and such. Soon I had no idea where the person went. I radioed for backup and continued. I walked through the woods, now hearing nothing. I used my flashlight and looked around and called out every so often. There was still nothing. After walking through the woods for a few more minutes, I decided to head back. It took me a few minutes to get back out of the woods to my car, and when I got there, I saw that indeed a large rock had been tossed at my rear window. It didn't break, but it did show some damage. Then there was a dent in my back bumper as if it had been kicked. The rock was down on the ground next to the car. I stayed there, and soon after backup arrived. I told them what happened, and a few of us looked around the area and in the woods for a bit. After not having any luck with it, we drove around the area. That woods led to a few properties, and then there was another road past them. We went and knocked on the doors of the homeowners who lived over there. None of them said they saw or heard anything, and I didn't think either were responsible. After that, we continued to search around a little, but whoever had done it was gone, and the mystery was never solved. To this day, I still wonder about that. It was such a seemingly random attack, but to go after a police vehicle like that, you have to have a lot of nerve. And it was really strange with it being the middle of the night and nothing going on. Then they just vanished into the woods. I returned to that spot several times after that, but nothing else like that ever happened again. A really creepy thing happened just last year. For a little background, I'm a woman who lives alone in an apartment. I've lived in this complex for several years now, and it's a pretty decent place. One night I was at home by myself, and at maybe 10 o'clock there was a knock at my front door. It was strange to receive a knock at this hour late at night. I got up and walked over to check through the peephole. When I did, I saw that there was a police officer standing there. I had no idea what the cops would be doing here. The officer looked fairly young, but he was tall and strong looking. I opened the door and he said his name, but I can't remember what it was, and then he said he was with the police department. He went on to say that he was investigating a hit and run where somebody had hit my vehicle and left. He then asked me the make and model of my car to confirm it, and when I told him, he said yes, that was it. Now, I parked my car in the parking garage that was underneath the building. It seemed strange that somebody would hit my car, but my parking space was kind of near the door, so it was possible. I knew nothing about the situation, and I asked the officer. He told me that he had only heard witness accounts, and he hadn't seen the video yet, and he didn't witness the crash, but he wanted me to come down and see my car. Then he said they were going to do some insurance stuff, and I would be able to go back to my place. So I told him okay, and then I left my apartment with him. I was stressed out in that moment, wondering how badly damaged my car was, and who on earth had hit it. As we left my apartment and were walking down the hallway to the elevator, I asked for more details. The officer said that the car was apparently leaving and crashed into mine, and then they just left. I didn't even notice what floor the officer pushed when we got onto the elevator. When it stopped, it was in the lobby, and he started to walk out. At first, I followed him without even thinking, but when he started to leave the building, I realized this wasn't right because my car was in the garage, not the parking lot. That was the first red flag. I asked the officer where we were going, and I told him that my car was in the garage. He then said that my car had been towed for the investigation, and he was going to take me to it. That was the second red flag. But still, I was believing him for the most part. I was just more so confused, not really suspicious yet. There was a lot going through my mind with all this news being sprung on me so fast. When we left the apartment and started walking through the parking lot, I also saw no police cars or anything. The parking lot was very quiet with it being late at night, and not much seemed to be going on. As we walked, that's when I really came to my senses, and I felt like this was seeming really sketchy. We were walking across the parking lot to a group of cars, and none of them were police cars at all. I asked the man where his car was. He then said that he was undercover tonight. That was the third red flag. Now I was thinking he was not a real cop. That's when I really got skeptical. I'm not an expert on police uniforms either, but his looked to be legit. I really don't know though. It's very possible that it was way off. I figured then that I had to think of something though. I told the man that I really had to pee and asked him if I could go quick. He said that where we were going was not that far away, but I told him that I didn't think I could wait and I would be really quick. I just started walking back to the apartment building without even giving him an option but to say yes. So he said okay, and then he followed me. When we got to the doors, I said, "I will be right back." I was hoping that he would take this as a signal not to follow me to the building and wait outside, but he did not. He continued to follow me and we walked back into the building. We went back to the elevator and all the way up to my floor. As we were, I asked him more questions about the crash, but he said he only knew what was reported to him. When we left the elevator at my floor, he followed me all the way to my apartment. I opened the door and he walked right into my place behind me. This made me really nervous, because now this guy who I thought was a fake cop was in my apartment. I walked to my bathroom and went inside and immediately locked the door. Thankfully, he didn't follow me into there and he waited outside. However, he did follow me like all the way to the door and was waiting right outside in the hallway as opposed to waiting by the front door. As soon as I got in there, I dialed 911 and called the real cops. I explained to the 911 operator that I was told someone had crashed into my car and I named my apartment complex. I asked if they knew anything about this. When I was saying this, I heard the guy knock on the bathroom door. He asked me what I was doing. I didn't answer him. Then he tried opening the door. The operator was not aware of a crash at my building. I told her that I thought a fake cop was in my apartment. The guy tried to open the door a few more times, and then I heard him quickly walk away. Then I heard him leave my apartment. When that happened, I left the bathroom to quickly lock my apartment door. I was told that a real cop would come to my building. I waited in my apartment. However, when they got there, the fake cop was gone. I gave a report and then went down to the parking garage to find my car still in my parking space with no damage. The whole thing was a lie. That guy was pretending to be a cop to get me to go into his car and possibly kidnap me. The police said they would investigate. However, I don't believe that he was ever found. I never heard anything more, but I also never saw him again. I'm really glad that I had the idea to go back to my apartment when I did. In my time as a police officer, I've had some very interesting encounters and some creepy stories. There's one that's the craziest one that still gives me the creeps to remember it. It happened a few years ago when I was fairly new to the job. I had been an officer for just a couple of years and mostly worked overnights patrolling the area. The city that I worked in was mostly pretty average. It's fairly large and a mix of commercial, residential, and rural areas. It was nighttime, and as I drove down one of the streets, I came across a car with no plates. There was no indication of a license plate number in the window either or anything, so I decided to pull the car over. I initiated my lights and got closer to the vehicle. However, the car did not pull over at first. In fact, it started to go faster. I braced myself for a chase, something that I had only had to deal with once before in my career to that point. The car drove down that road for about half a mile. There were not that many other cars on the road at all, thankfully, but the car turned right quickly, which led to a much quieter road. I turned after it and now had my siren going. A short ways down that road, and the driver turned again at a very sharp angle. The car almost didn't make the turn, but just barely did. After it made this turn, it quickly pulled over to the side of the road, sort of going into the ditch. I was still pretty much right behind it, but then I saw the door open and the driver quickly get out. It was a man, and I didn't see him for very long at all. He took off running, and within probably a second, he was in the woods, which was right off of that road. I pulled over my car right behind his, and quickly got out and ran after him. I yelled at the man to stop, but he had a pretty far head start. I remember that by the time I got in the woods, he was way out there. It was really dense, and I couldn't hardly see anything at all. I went a short ways in, but then thought better of it. I stayed by the car and waited for backup to arrive. Probably less than a minute later, they did. After more officers arrived on scene, we then searched the immediate area, and the suspect was nowhere in sight. Later on, a canine unit arrived, as well as many more officers, and the car was towed. But an initial look at the car did not yield any evidence. The car was completely empty. There was literally nothing in it at all, no items or anything. And after searching the area, the suspect was not located. I remember wondering how he had managed to get away. It happens sometimes though, especially in an area with lots of hiding places like a woods. I figured he ran someplace else and then maybe got a ride from someone, or he was still possibly hiding. However, over the next few days, it only got more confusing. The car that he was driving had no plates obviously, and no vehicles of its description had been reported stolen. The VIN number led back to an old used car dealership that wasn't even aware it had been stolen, which sounds crazy, but they had over 100 cars and it was a pretty rundown place. Anyways, a few nights later, I got done with work and went home. When I got back that night, there was a random note on my front door. This seemed really odd. I picked it up and read it. The note said, "Better luck next time." It was handwritten. At first, I was very confused, but after a while, I figured that it was most likely from the man that had run from me and got away. I didn't have any security cameras or anything. I reported it, but despite that, we never solved the case. The craziest thing is that the suspect somehow found out where I lived and then put a note at my house. Unless it was someone else trying to scare me as a prank, but I find that highly unlikely. This happened a few years ago. I used to work a lot of night shifts at my job. I would get a couple of breaks, and I didn't like the break room that we had there. So many times, instead of sitting in the break room, I would instead go out to my car. I would rather just sit there and hang out until my break was up. So one time, I was working another really late shift. I got off at 2 a.m., so I took my break at around 11 p.m. So I left and went out to my car in the parking lot. I was hungry, but realized that I had forgot to pack anything, so I decided to drive somewhere. I ended up going to the gas station that was less than a mile away that had a convenience store. I went inside, got something to have for a snack, and then went back to my vehicle. The gas station, as well as everything else in the area, was really quiet now with it being so late at night. And this was one of those larger gas stations that had a good amount of parking spaces, so I just sat there for my break. I was eating and just watching YouTube on my phone and hanging out there. But about 10 minutes into this, and this security guard cop type of guy came up to me. He came walking out from I don't even know where. There was parking on both sides of the convenience store building as well as gas pumps, so I think he came from the other side because I didn't see a cop car or anything around me. Now, I wasn't sure if he even was a cop or a security guard or something because he was wearing a uniform that looked like police, but it seemed a little off. He walked right up to my window and was looking at me. I rolled it down and he came up and asked me what I was doing. I told him that I was just on my break from work. He asked me if I worked at the gas station and I said no, and I told him where I did work. Then he suddenly told me to get out of the car. This took me by surprise and it seemed really weird. I asked him why. He then said that he smelled the odor of a controlled substance. which is total nonsense because I didn't have any drugs or anything like that in my car, and I didn't do any drugs either. I was shocked. I was left speechless for a moment before saying, I don't have anything. And I didn't smell anything strange at all either. At that point, I straight up asked the guy, are you even a cop? He said, don't worry about it. Then he tried to open my door, which was locked. He started reaching inside the window and quickly hit the button to close it. As the window started going up, he tried to reach the handle, but thankfully could not. He told me to open the door and started banging on it. I told him I would if he showed me his badge. He then reached into his pocket and pulled out what appeared to be a badge, but I couldn't tell what kind of badge it was or if it was real or not. I don't even know what a legitimate police officer badge looks like. To be honest, I have no clue. So I realized that was kind of a stupid idea by me. He tried to open my door again. I told him to call for backup. He told me that I was being difficult and he didn't want to waste anyone else's time and that I should stop wasting his time as well. I said that I would call the police and I took out my phone and started to dial 911. Then the guy started banging on my window like crazy and trying to open my door. I didn't want him to break my window, so as a reaction I just put the car into reverse and backed up. The guy chased after me at first, but then he ran away. I drove out of there and went back to my work. As I was driving, I called the cops and told them what was going on. I got back to my job and waited there for the real police to show up. That other cop security guard guy was now nowhere to be found. The police arrived and I told them everything that happened. They said it sounded like a fake cop and they would investigate. Then I went back to work. For a few days I heard nothing, but then I found out that the guy was caught and he was in fact not a real cop. He had a record of impersonating police and was continuing to do so, and he had gotten in trouble for it before. I'm really glad that I didn't let him into my car. I'm not sure what his intentions were, but it was a really sketchy situation. This is the story of something that happened in my time as a police officer. I was working one night when I got a call from dispatch saying there was a woman who thought someone might be in her basement. She wanted an officer to come by and check it out. I was given the address and that was all the information that I knew about it. I was by myself and drove out there and got to her place. It was a quiet neighborhood that had some pretty standard looking houses. By now it was like midnight, so things were really quiet. I parked out front and then got out and walked up to the door. The house had a light on in front, and before I even got to the front step, a woman opened the door and came outside. She seemed frightened and told me that she thought somebody might be in her basement. I asked her to tell me what was going on, and she said that she woke up to the sound of footsteps in her house. She told me that she was sure she heard somebody walking in her house and then go down into the basement down the stairs. Then she called the police, and that was about 30 minutes ago. She stated that she hadn't heard any noises since, and she didn't see anyone ever. I asked her if she knew of any signs of a break-in, and she said not that she knew of. So I told her that I would check things out. She didn't even want to go back into the house though, and she said she would wait outside. So I walked in, and most of the lights were off. I turned on a couple of them and looked around. Right off the bat, as I looked for the basement, I tried to notice anything out of place, like if any doors or windows were broken. Things seemed fine. I was able to find the basement pretty easily. It had a door and then the staircase going down. The lights down there were all off and the door was slightly open. I took my flashlight and looked for a light switch. I turned it on, but it didn't really do much as the basement was unfinished and had very poor lighting. Before walking down, I called out announcing myself as police and if anyone was down there to make themselves known. There was no response. I yelled out so I knew if anyone was there, they would have heard me. Now, I didn't think the woman was lying, but I was hoping that maybe she was mistaken. Maybe she just thought she heard footsteps, because now I didn't want to deal with a possible home intruder alone by myself. I considered calling for backup right then and there, but did not. I had no evidence that somebody was there, so I walked down the stairs. In the basement, there was a mixture of boxes and old furniture and things like that scattered around. A pretty standard scene for an old unfinished basement. There were also pipes and beams scattered around here and there. After making it to the bottom of the stairs, I looked around. Things seemed fine until I looked to one corner. Then I saw him. There was a man on the ground, hiding halfway behind an old desk. It was kind of hard to see him because he was lying down, but somehow I did. I then yelled at him to get up and put his hands up. He did not. He remained lying there, but I saw him look up at me. I yelled at him again, and I reached for my taser just in case. I told him to come out again, and I saw him slowly moving. He moved from a laying down position to a crouch position. I was still yelling at him, but I also hit my radio and began to call for backup. As I was in the middle of doing this, the man suddenly got up and started sprinting at me. He was holding something in his hand, and I didn't know what it was. Within 2 seconds, he was probably within 10 feet of me. As a reaction, I already had the taser in my hand, and I quickly aimed it and then tased him. Thankfully, I got him, and in an instant, he dropped his weapon and fell to the ground, landing just about 2 feet away from me. When he was on the ground, I quickly moved and handcuffed him. Then I radioed again to dispatch and made sure that the man did not have any other weapons. He was saying that he didn't do anything and stuff like that. I walked over and saw his weapon of choice, which was a piece of a metal pipe. Within minutes, backup had arrived. The man was let out of the house and arrested. The woman was very relieved. I'm not sure how that guy even got into her house or what his plans were, but I know that he was very dangerous based on the way he came at me and tried to attack me.